Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Lee, and this is the Game of Tongues, and where we work on speech anxiety in all its forms. And this evening, it's evening where I am, we have the privilege of having with us Jason Ewing, who is one of the founders of Speech Anxiety Anonymous, and he's a director of Speech Anxiety Anonymous, and he helps a bit with coaching some people, and he's gotten more into that. Jason is in his early 40s. Um, I'm looking to the right because I'm looking at my notes. He received my book in August of 2016. We began Skyping in the fall. He lives in Kentucky, and he's married with two children, and um, by November of 2016, after 8 or so Skypes, Jason said, and I observed, that he had reduced his stuttering from 80 to 90% of sentences. From that was his at the time when we started, down to 10 to 20% of sentences. I want to interrupt and say my train of thought. I forgot one thing. When he first came to me, he told me that he was stuttering pretty heavily, and he told me that he had stuttered basically all his life since he was 3, and throughout school he'd had different kinds of help. And when he finished his schooling, one of the last things that he was told was, to quote him, he said, they said, well, Jason, you just got to learn to live with it. And so Jason did that. And from the end of his schooling days until he contacted me at around age 40, um, and had read my book, and we started working together. By We had started Skyping in September of 2016. By December 14th, Jason said to me, quote, my worst days now are better than my best days were 6 months ago. And um, in the following week, I wrote in my own notes, his progress made my day. Um, he said in he had said earlier that he had wanted at one point to purchase a Speech Easy device,
Mhm.
but unfortunately he couldn't afford one of those devices.
True.
And he said it supposedly relays everything that you say like you're speaking to someone else. And a therapist that he had even told me um, that those techniques aren't practical in certain situations. Actually, on the Speech Easy device, I know nothing about it except what Jason has told me and other people. I don't know. I know one person. I've known at least a half a dozen people who've had them. I know one person who still uses it. One person, and I think he's bagging it now because he just doesn't need it anymore. Um, the therapist. Okay, so going on, I noticed again in December of 2016 great improvement. He had had no stutters or hesitation, a 95% performance I witnessed, and he admitted that he'd had about 6 hesitations in 40 minutes. A hesitation is not
Mhm.
a disability. That's taking a break, and we need to not punish ourselves for making. Everybody says I went to the store the other day and I met my friend Fred and blah and we went out and had a lunch and had a good time. That's not stuttering. When we go, what's your name? And now, when we can't get the words out, this is a disability, and that's what we're fighting. We're not trying to be perfect human beings because we're not. My speech isn't perfect. I think it's great. I'm super happy with it, but it's not perfect, and I make a stutter once in a while, not by fear, not by fear, just stumbles as I do. Fear. When I get a fear, I use a crutch, and I don't stutter. Period. Um, okay, so then I noticed, let's see, he's been very, I want to say that my observations of Jason are that he did a lot of reading. He was a workaholic. He did a lot of reading aloud. He's faithful. He does what you ask him to do. He does his job, and he does his auto suggestions. He's still doing them, I think. He'll tell us when I finish giving my little observations here. And so I noticed in January of 2017, um, I observed that when he had first Skyped with me in September of 2016, he'd stuttered or hesitate or mildly blocked on a third to half his words. And during the last several Skypes, um, he hadn't uh, he hadn't done that. And in his own words, he had hesitated about 6 times. So the bottom line to me was, even in January of 2017, Jason had stopped stuttering. He hesitated, but only infrequently. And I did not then detect him as one. I would not have then detected him, and I still wouldn't, of course, as one with a speech problem. Um, I can remember a couple of instances, a couple of things that stuck out to me, um, very that really made my day. At one point, he told me, he said, "Oh, I had a great week," and I said, "What happened, Jason?" And he said, "I went to a restaurant with my family," and he said, "For the first time ever, I ordered an entire meal without stuttering, and my family was over the moon." And of course, I was over the moon. And then I can remember Jason telling me that when he was, in a bar having a beer, and some be sitting next to somebody, and they'd say, "I'm George. What's your name?" It would be, and it would be this horrible scene. And he said, now he said, when I'm in the bar, he said, I enjoy saying my name, and I can say it, and it's wonderful. And then I remember him telling me his biggest problem, which is true with most people who stutter, was true with me too, problems with authority figures. So when he's at work and his boss comes rolling up, or his boss says, and he would have problems. And then especially in staff meetings, and this is very, very common among stutterers, Jason would say, I hated staff meetings because they'd say, okay, everybody introduce themselves. We got some new people here, so you had to take your turn. That kind of thing killed me. I used to leave those meetings and go to the bathroom and come back when they were finished. That's how I handled them, because I couldn't do it. Jason, I can remember him saying, I hate those things. And finally, he's telling me, he said, now when I go to the staff meetings, I can't wait for them to say, introduce yourself. I'm crushed if they don't ask me to introduce myself. And that's the kind of change that I witnessed in Jason. And let me keep going here, because in February of 2017, um, he said this. I typed this while he said it. I'm a fast typist. I used to stutter on most words on a bad day. After reading your book, I was about 40% improved today. Then, after Skyping for a while, for the first time in my life, I could order a meal in a restaurant without stuttering. And after a few more Skypes, I wasn't really stuttering anywhere, except at work, mainly with my bosses. Now I don't even fear talking to them, and I'm not stuttering with them either. In fact, I'm not really stuttering anywhere enough to be noticed. I don't like to put a percentage on my improvement. It's hard to say, but I just know that I only stutter on a few words a day now, and I'm not afraid of speech anymore. I don't think that strangers see me as a stutterer now. In fact, I don't fear stuttering anymore. In fact, I don't think about stuttering very often anymore. Unquote. And I, at that point, and that was February of last year, of 2017. I evaluated him as a 90+% improved with his speech, and we continued on. And then I noticed, I have notes here that we Skyped in June of last year, 2017. We hadn't Skyped in 5 weeks, but he had no incidents, he reported, no ongoing fears. He told me he was still doing his auto suggestions. He was still reading aloud daily. And frankly, I observed an entire change in his countenance. I think that's still true. And he's changed to one, he's much more lighthearted, and he's much more calm. And it comes out of the pores. I mean, it's just there. When this whole thing quiets down, it's like letting steam out of a kettle. and letting it cool down. And that's what's happened. And so, on June 26th of 2017, we talked again, and he had zero speech issues, almost no fears. I still have fears. It's been 40 years. I don't care, and I don't view using a crutch as a crime or an admission of defeat. I view it as a victory.
Yes.
Because I'm winning the war. I have won the war. And I'll never let Satan stuttering back in my life. He tries. I had a stuttering incident like 2 months ago in New York City, but I didn't stutter. I had to say the same words about 5 times in a row to 5 different people. I used 3 or 4 different crutches doing it. And no one ever knew. They didn't know. My wife was with me. She didn't know. We walked out. The point is, when you know the crutches, you don't ever have to stutter. It doesn't matter if the fear comes and goes once in a while. I have these 6 guns on each hip with 6 silver bullets in each gun, 12 crutches. And I blow the guy away. And that's what Jason, I think, is still doing. So in June 22 of 2017, Jason and I had our first Skype in a year. Wow. And he couldn't, I put this in bold type, he couldn't remember when he had his last embarrassing stuttering incident, because we grade our speech in 2 grades, pass and fail. It was either an embarrassing, humiliating appearance of a disability, that's a failure, or it wasn't, and that's a pass. And if we get a pass, way to go, Lee, way to go, Jason, star. And the more we give ourselves credit and admit our success, the more success we will have. And that's a fact. So that was the case in June 22, 2017. And he said, I no longer think of myself as a stutterer. And I love that. I love that. And so I have not, according to my notes, I have not talked to Jason since June 22, 2017. Today is April 26th, 2018. And I miss him. He's a great guy. He's a lot of fun. I consider him a friend of mine now. And we met through speech, and we worked together on speech, and that's what we do. And he stopped stuttering, and he's living a much happier life. That's my view of Jason. That's my Jason story. And I'm going to ask Jason now to say, well, Lee, that's right, but this was wrong, or I would add this, whatever Jason wants to say. The blabbermouth over here, love it, has finished, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Jason and say, Jason, how has your speech been since we talked in June 22, 2017?
Well, Lee, I'm very glad to be here tonight with you. And I'd just like to say that my speech is wonderful now. I would like to elaborate on the fact that I was basically a stutterer for 40 years, practically 40 years. And that's a long time to do something like that. I know probably a lot of people, I've probably stuttered longer than most people that stutter have been alive.
That's right.
So, to be able to speak now and not have a panic attack because I have to say my name, I have to introduce myself, it's made a world of difference in my life, and it's just so much easier now to speak. I don't have to be afraid to speak to people. Speaking is a game, and I like games, and it's good to have fun with that.
Exactly.
And the main, you mentioned auto-suggestion treatments. My main auto-suggestion treatment is focus on the message, not the word.
Great.
I never knew why I stuttered until you told me why I stuttered. I wasn't focusing on my message.
Yeah.
I was focusing on the word. For 40 years, I never knew what I was doing wrong with my speech. I never knew that. And I can honestly say now that's what it was.
Jason, somebody has typed in Somebody has typed in whom I don't know. You are an inspiration, Jason, and that's the fact.
Well, well, I'm very glad to hear that. I hope I'm an inspiration to everyone. I always would try to be that way. And yeah, my whole life I stuttered. And, you know, when I was a kid, it was really bad. I stuttered really bad as a child. And, the kids at school, they would laugh at me, they'd make fun of me. And back in those days, it was sociably acceptable to laugh at stuttering. Nobody seen
Exactly.
any problem with that. It was okay to make fun of the guy that stuttered. Ha ha ha! Look at him.
Jesus,
Yeah, they
it's
would.
not funny, but
Yeah, they would. And so,
it's
I had to grow up tough, and no one ever cut me any slack.
yeah.
Um, Even with my parents, they would always say, well, when I got older and got to be a teenager, they're like, well, you're going to have to get a job. And I'm like, well, I can't work because I stutter. Oh, that's no excuse. Get out there and work. And I would have to go to work, and then my coworkers would make fun of me, and sometimes my supervisors would make fun of me, and it's like you just have to get thick skinned and go on, and but it made me stronger. It really did. It made me stronger. I can honestly say it probably desensitized me with my stuttering. I was never very sensitive when someone would make fun of me because I just grew accustomed to that. I knew somebody was going to laugh, and it just desensitized me, and it's like, okay, that's just how it is. And
Let me
so
just
yeah.
inject. Let me just inject. Hold your thought. But one of you remember the video that I did where at the end I say stuttering was a great blessing in my life, and that's what I want for you. And Jason, I honestly believe that you have converted stuttering into a blessing in your life. Am I correct?
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't remove the pain of the
Right.
past years, but life is in the present, and you're going to live a long time, Jason, with any luck. You're going to live a long time, and you're going to live so much happier life. You're making a bigger contribution to your family and to your employers, to your friends at work, and to everybody around you. You're able to contribute more because you can speak basically I can tell, and anyone who's listening, who ever listens to this video, is going to be able to tell that you're thinking message. You're thinking
hmm
message and idea. You're not thinking words. And you're thinking about the listener, not about yourself. It's how you can sell your message effectively. And
hmm
you're focused on that. And when you do that, there's no heat on words and there's no
Right.
stuttering. There's no
Right.
reason that it can't get there.
Right. Right. The whole purpose of speaking is you have an idea in your head, and I have to get the idea from my head to your head. And we do that by speaking with each other. And that's how we do that.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
What would you say? Can you tell us what you think? Was there a single turning point or two or three turning points in your journey to stop stuttering?
Well, you know, it was one of those things where my stuttering got to a point where it bothered other people more than myself. And I could tell when I would speak to someone, it really bothered them when I would speak to them. I could tell, because it would take a long time for me to talk. I mean, I couldn't get the message to someone, and it would bother people. And I guess I just got tired of, you know, tired of that. Really, and it's like, well, something has to be done. I would always have days of fluency. I would have good days and bad days. And when it was bad, it was really bad. I was almost mute and couldn't say a word. And,
Yeah,
that was really bad, on those times.
yeah.
And, but still, the stuttering would always linger. Um, I was too afraid to make phone calls. I had a panic attack if I had to make a phone call, and it was bad stuff. You go to you mentioned earlier going to a restaurant and ordering a meal. Well, it would take me sometimes 5 or 10 minutes to order a meal in a restaurant.
Jesus, that's not
And
funny. That's
that's
not. Look,
bad.
in retrospect, look, I've been there myself, but it was longer ago than you.
Yeah, it's bad. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, and so anyway, my father, he was always my whole life wanting to help me defeat, you know, my my stuttering. And as a matter of fact, he was the one that came across your book, on Amazon, and he suggested that I email you, and I did, and I'm glad I did. And it's been the most effective methods to control my stuttering, cure your stuttering, whatever anybody wants to call it. It works, and that's the
That's right. Thank
that's the
you.
main
Thank you.
thing.
It
That's the
works.
main thing.
Call it a hot dog,
You
but
know,
it works.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't. I've never been obsessed with cure or not cure. To me, that's irrelevant. If it works, use it.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it works for me, and I'm very proud to admit that, and I'll tell the world that. And another thing, Lee, is I would like to tell you to earlier this week I was contacted again by the Kentucky Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, and they asked me a second time if I would be interested in a Speech Easy device. And I said, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. I no longer need that. Thank you anyway. And so
I,
I declined twice.
I
You
love
know.
it. I
So yeah,
love it.
I don't need anything like that, and I'm sure that probably most people don't.
Yeah. 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 The only person I know who still uses it is now telling me that they're taking it out heavy periods of time. They're getting rid. They said, look, it did help before I started. Read your book and got into the methods. He said it helped me, but it didn't fix it. It just made it a little easier. But he said I
Hmm.
really don't need it now. I got
Yeah,
other things going on. So,
yeah.
what do you? So during the period of your journey to stop stuttering, which again, um, looking at it, our first Skype was in October of 2016, and we I didn't put down the date that we posted your success story on Speech Anxiety Anonymous. You were among the first, so it had to be fairly early in 2017. It was probably March or April, but that's when we formed SAA. So
Right.
I think you were done before then, but I would say it looks like we started in September, so September, October, November, December, January, February. I would say it was about 6 months, and of course in December, you canceled, I canceled. We do cancel. We don't talk. We didn't talk every week, but we were pretty faithful. And I have to say, Jason, a lot of people don't keep up their momentum. They'll Skype a couple of times and they'll miss 2 or 3 times and then come back, and they don't do their homework the way Jason did it. And I assign homework. I write emails and I assign homework. I ask him to do things. Jason does the work. He always did what I asked him to do, and it pays off because he's lifting the weights every day and his muscles getting bigger. Big surprise. So it was about 6 months, and then he was done. It was probably maybe I'm going to say 4 months of real, maybe 16 Skypes or something like that, that it took to do it. But during that course of time, Jason, and he still does a lot of this. And I'm going to ask him in a second what he still does. But for a long time, he was reading aloud like an hour a day, and he was doing his auto suggestions a couple of times a day, 20 minutes each, and he was working the crutches, working the crutches, working the crutches, because that's how you that's how you avoid going backwards when you talk. no matter how much you read aloud or auto-suggestion, if you then talk nonstop and stutter all the time, you're not gonna get there. And so Jason used the crutches. Now, and eventually I say, when you really know the crutches like the back of your hand, when you know what your fingers know what to do when you grab the ball without telling your fingers what to do, when you know that your crutches like that, then you don't really need them anymore. And once in a while, yes, but I use a crutch once in a while, but it's once a month or something else. Now again, I I stopped stuttering 40 years ago. Jason stopped stuttering a year ago, so it's different. But Jason, let me just ask you: have you had anything that you would call a relapse since you and I talked?
No, not a relapse. Of course, there's are still moments when I can feel myself. I'm going to get hung up on a certain word. I do still have those moments when I know it's going to happen, but I've got a choice to make. I can either have a public wrestling match with a word, or I can use a crutch. You
Exactly.
know.
And if you use a crutch, then that's a victory, and you've still stopped stuttering. And I just told you in New York less than 2 months ago, I had such an incident. And I would have absolutely stuttered in public in a
Mhm.
restaurant if I
Yeah.
hadn't used a crutch. Now, do
Yeah.
I view that as some sort of weakness on my part? I do not. I know how to use a baseball bat. Do I use that as a weakness when I get a hit? No. And I know I deal with adversity and I beat it. And I'm proud of it. And every time I beat it, I'm more proud of it. Even as late in the game as it is for me, I'm still proud of it. I'll tell the world that.
Yeah.
And I can say, as you can say, I stopped stuttering. I didn't say I'm not a stutterer. Read the beginning of my book. I said I am a stutterer. I just
Right.
don't stutter.
Right. Hmm.
So that's kind of Jason and I think sing from the same sheet music, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Now, what are you doing on a daily basis now, a year after you basically stopped stuttering?
I still do the same things I've always done, Lee. About an hour before we started tonight, I read aloud. I still do that on a daily basis. I read aloud. I still like to say my auto suggestion treatments daily. I even still say them now to myself when I have time to do that. And, it helps. It really
Aren't
does.
in your family proud of you, the progress you've made with this?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe they are. Uh huh. Sure. I know I'm
Well,
very
I
proud.
am.
I'm very proud. Well, thank you very much, Lee. I couldn't have done it without you. You are a fine speech coach, very fine speech coach, and yeah, it. I don't know why anybody would doubt the methods, from SAA and say that they wouldn't work because I don't. I mean, I don't know anybody else's story about stuttering, but I was a moderate to severe stutterer, and it worked for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, and there was a lot of and all through school I had speech therapy, and even after school my parents would take me to speech therapy, and nothing really worked. I mean, a lot of the techniques and methods were stuff that just wasn't really practical.
And so you basically had therapy pretty much continuously throughout school.
Oh yes, I've had speech therapy from first grade to 12th grade.
So you had 12 grades of therapy in school.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and the bottom line was you their final message to you was, Jason, you got to learn to live with it.
Yeah, I mean, I had speech therapists tell me, well, there's no cure for stuttering.
Yeah.
And I took that as, well, that means I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to improve. So, yeah, you just had to really deal with it. And I went through all the hard stuff in my life, when I was a teenager. I went through the phase that, when you try to ask girls out on dates. And I went through all the times when you had to go to job interviews and, all the hard stuff, and so sometimes it was pretty bad, you
Yeah.
know, and, but, I fortunately, like I said earlier, I was never very sensitive to my stuttering. People would laugh, and I'm like, "Oh, go ahead and laugh, and it's
Well,
okay."
you became you used the word desensitized earlier, and I
Hmm.
think that's a good
Yes.
word,
Yes.
because you were mocked and ridiculed, and after a while you developed like a turtle. You got a pretty tough skin
Yeah.
there, a
Right.
nice shell, and you just,
Right.
learn to accept it and ignore it and
Hmm.
go with the flow. But of course now, um, the quality of your life is so much better, is it not?
That's a lot better. Yeah, definitely. Um, you know, it's just so much easier now to speak. You know, I mean, uh, it's not a big deal to talk to people anymore. That used to be a big deal for me. If I had to call someone on the phone and say something, I mean, I would have to go through a major, you know, it was just, crazy. I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to call somebody. Oh no, what am I going to do? I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't do it. I wish I could pay somebody to do it for me. I have the phone.
And so
And
now what do you do when you grab the phone?
well, now, I always remember, first of all, think of the message, not the words.
Right.
And that, that is a lifesaver right there. Just think of the message. But
It's so easy. It's so
yeah,
hard, but it's once you do it, it's so
yeah,
easy.
yeah. And I
You're
had
doing it now as you talk to me.
sure,
You're thinking of
I
the
had
message.
someone, I had, I told someone that one time, and they asked me, well, how do you do that, Jason? How do you focus on the message? I don't get it. And I said, well, it's kind of hard to explain. You just have to grasp the idea. Speak, speak what's in your head. I told him,
Exactly.
I said, speak what's in your head. Don't speak what's coming out of your mouth. Speak what's up here. And
Exactly.
I still don't think he got it, but oh well. Hopefully one day he will.
That's right. That's right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're you're so composed, and it's I miss talking to you, and I miss talking to
Yeah.
Josh Zello, who preceded you, and Johnson's son, who followed you. You were my first three guys off the book, and bless your heart, all three of you self-cured. um, I think Johnson had the worst problem. He's the guy who checked himself into the hospital, into the
Hmm.
emergency room, and wrote, "I cannot speak." And they got him a state therapist,
Hmm.
and 150 sessions later, he was still not able to talk, and he did all kinds of things
Yeah.
like this with his head and everything when he talked, when he came to me. But he just went back to China. Incidentally, today, Jason, Johnson's son, Zhenhua Johnson's son, Johnson's his sort of adopted English American name. He went back to China today. He went back to Shanghai, and he got his degree in engineering, electrical engineering, in New York at the university there, and so he's going back to Shanghai, and I'm hopefully he's going to have time to set up an SAA chapter for us over there. And as you know, he translated my book into
Right.
Chinese.
Right. Hmm.
And his father
That is
was a
great.
language teacher in China, and he edited what Johnson did. So I think we got a good translation.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an amazing transformation for him.
And he's going to publish that book in China,
That's great.
put it out over there, because they
That's
have problems with
fantastic.
Amazon and all. The Chinese, the government interferes with the way they access things.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's going to be a big help. But you three guys, I'll never forget you. Because all I knew was my methods work for me. What do
Hmm.
I know? I'm one guy. But to me, logic said they're going to work for anybody, or pretty much anybody, and they have. Jason, to this day, I don't think there's been anybody who stayed with us 8 Skypes or more, um, who hasn't stopped stuttering. I didn't say they stopped in 8. I said if they stayed 8, they didn't leave without stopping stuttering. you
Hmm.
know and so, and we've got 20 some of them posted on Speech Anxiety Anonymous now, and I'm just one guy here. And some of these people, it takes a long time. They've stuttered on unbelievable stutterers.
Right.
I got 3 or 4 of them now that can't say one word, not
Right.
one
Right.
word.
Yeah, I know that was one thing that you always taught me and told me when we were Skyping together. You know, because I never met another stutterer in person before my whole life. Never. I've never met one. I thought I was the only one in the world that did this.
Boy, what a lonely feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't relate to anybody, nobody I knew anybody that stuttered. I was the only one. And I know you would tell me, well, Jason, there's people out there that stutter on every word, and I thought, wow, that's really bad.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
to have to stutter on every word. I mean, I thought that my stuttering was bad, but I had no idea that there were people out there that had it even worse than what I did.
Yeah, I've had some of them that I haven't gotten a word out of them in 3 and 4 Skypes, not a word.
Hmm.
And they Skype. I say, I mean, they try to talk, and there's a lot of head bobbing and some noises. And I just say, look, I want to help you, and so the only way we're going to get there is for you to, we got to communicate. So you got to answer my questions. You got to type on Skype the
Hmm.
answers to my questions. So that's what we do. And so far, I haven't had anybody that I haven't gotten into a talking mode by the fourth Skype. I mean, saying something, getting something done, and it's very extreme measures that we have to use with them. Um, but you were in the severe category. You definitely were, because
Yeah.
it's just a question of how severe.
Right.
There's all degrees of severe.
Yeah, right. Well, and of course, too, with my stuttering, it was always very strange because, like I would say, I would experience some days with fluency, and then the next day I wouldn't, and it was
Yeah,
very odd. But one thing I could always do, and I think it helped, I could always read aloud without having any problems.
and
I
some
never,
people can't do that either.
yeah, but I never had that issue. I could read from a book just fine. It was just
Yeah.
being able to communicate with
And you know
someone.
why that is? I mean, why it normally is? Because the words are there for you. You don't have to process them. So if you
Hmm.
just look at them and react, oh, that word means pig, that's cow, that's dog, and whatever.
Hmm.
You're not processing the word. So it's only when they get to a more severe level, and then they start thinking about that, and they think about how they're going to pronounce it, and then they can't do that either. So,
Hmm.
and some of them, the only way they can communicate is whispering, and there's some that can't do that. And it's really sad. But
Right.
you know something? We get them whispering. We get them whispering. Before long, we get them whispering. And they start to communicate. Jason, I have them carrying a pad around, and a pen. And I say, when you go to talk, I want you to whisper. And if you can't, and they say, well, I can whisper sometimes, but I can't whisper all the time. Sometimes I and I said, okay, okay, okay. When you can't whisper, I want you to write. Don't wrestle with the word. Don't go, oh, oh, don't do that. Just write the word down. And that's what they do. And you know what? It takes the heat off them. And within 2, 3 weeks, they're whispering and writing. They're writing less and they're whispering more. And soon they're whispering, and we got them talking in their half voice instead of their full voice. We have whisper voice. We have a half voice. We have their regular voice. We get them whispering, then they can do their half voice a little bit. And next thing you know, they're climbing up and they're into their regular voice a little bit. and then they start using the crutches. But I mean, if you can't say one word, a crutch doesn't help you much. So, there's nothing to work with. But we're getting them going. We're actually making
Yeah,
progress with these people.
that's great. Very great.
Yeah. So, well, I'm still hopeful that our programs on Twitch are going to work well on Game of Tongues, and that in time, um, some of you guys can coach on here, can help me, can take sessions and whatever. I'm not sure mechanically how it's going to work because I'm sitting here looking at a computer that's all set up for it.
Hmm.
But um, maybe they're not all live time coaching. Maybe it's just private coaching, like I always did with you. It was
Hmm.
just you and me
Yeah.
and Skype, and that was it, and it worked fine. So maybe that's the way it goes. But I think we're getting more and more people, and hopefully these videos, like your video today, hopefully lots of people will watch that over time. I'm going to put it in the success story category, and we have a limited number of those. I don't have them for all the people that are on SAA because we weren't recording all this
Right.
time. We just
Yeah.
started recording.
It's
So
a one of those things where it's kind of a shame that you didn't record the first time that I Skyped with you and compare
exactly.
it to now.
But I've
And
got
that
those
way,
cases now. I'm getting those cases now. But it's a learning curve. I wrote a book because it was my notes that I had written from working with children of friends. So I converted that into a book. And then after I talked to you guys for a year, I added 120 pages to the book and put out a second edition. It's a much better book. And it could be redone now. I don't have time. We're going to have to now go to these videos and say, you want to know what's new, you got to go on here. You know,
right,
I
right. Well,
can't keep redoing a book.
I think this game of tongues. I think a wonderful thing to have.
Well, I'm
Uh,
glad you do. And we
yeah.
we we haven't promoted it yet, and we're about to start promoting it. I'm not quite sure how, but we're getting advice from some people, and um, I try and get free advice, and I do in a lot of cases, but I have to pay for some of it, so it takes me a little time, and so, but we're getting there. And every once in a while, somebody asks volunteers to donate, and I say not now, but we're going to get ads. They're going to run ads on this Twitch program. We're going to get paid for that, so maybe we can use the ad money to um, do more things, and maybe even eventually, I'm thinking if it gets widespread enough to even compensate coaches at some level for helping because a lot of people just can't afford the time, to do it. I'm talking about getting big numbers, to get big numbers. Um, I'm retired, obviously. I don't
Hmm.
work. So this is what
Right.
I do. So it's fine for me. But, you got a job every day.
Yeah.
Maybe you could spare, maybe you can donate an hour a week, maybe, but you can't
Hmm.
donate 10 hours, you know. And so we may find some people who can do that, but we'll need to pay them something. So we're working on it. We just get there one step at a time. The point is to keep it free to the PWS. That's the key.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure this itself will be able to help a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jason, I'm going to let you go because I've kept you
Okay.
almost an hour, and you got a family and you got things to do, and go have your dinner and have a nice evening. And listen, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I know everyone will who sees this, and over a period of time, Lord knows a lot of people may see this. So, and I'll put it on my Facebook thing. But over time, a lot of people hopefully will see it on Twitch. Right now, it's probably my cat and my dog, and other than that, one or two people, but we're getting there. But listen,
Yeah.
thanks again, and it's wonderful to see you again.
Oh, it's very wonderful to see and talk to you too, Lee. It's been a while, and I've always enjoyed our Skypes, and you've helped me out tremendously. And I keep doing what you're doing, and I think you can help a whole lot more people to beat their stuttering problem and everything. And it's just a an amazing thing. Speech Anxiety Anonymous. It's a wonderful thing for me to be a part of, and I'm very honored to be a part of that.
Well, we're honored to have you too, Jason. So I'm going to say goodbye to you and wish you all the best. Well, my best to your family, though I don't know them. I know who they are. So give them all my best, and I'll hope to talk to you, and I hope that it won't be a year before we talk again. Maybe we'll have a board meeting on Skype,
Sure.
quarterly. We'll get that going.
Yeah.
Okay?
That'd be fantastic, Lee.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening and a nice weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, buddy. Bye-bye.